Would the Twins make a good home for starters Jameson Taillon or Koudai Senga? Analyzing their fits on today's episode of Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Minnesota Twins podcast. Today is Sunday, November 27th, and I'm your gracious host, Nash Walker. Thanks so much for making Locked On Twins your first listen every single day on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, where you're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Again, this is Nash Walker, 3 seasons hosting a daily podcast on the Minnesota Twins, 4 seasons writing about the Twins at twinsdaily.com. I've seen this front office work now for 6 seasons. We know what they do. We know how they operate. It's subject to change. It could change this offseason. It could change next offseason. But for right now, we know things about this front office, how they approach free agency, and almost to a T, they do it every single year. And when it comes to the starting pitching market, the Twins in this front office have handed out one multi-year deal, and it was to Michael Pineda. I believe it was for 2 years. It was for 2 years. I believe it was for $21 million. That is their longest contract they've handed out to a pitcher, a starting pitcher in free agency. They gave Addison Reed a 2-year deal. So 2 years. That's as far as they've gone to a pitcher in free agency for $21 million, which, like, if they haven't done it to this point, and they had opportunities last year with a market that seemed tailored to their needs on the starting pitching free agent market, they still didn't do it. Like, if they haven't done it now, if they haven't done it to this point, who knows if they'll ever do it. But I'm looking at this market, and I know what they target. I know who they usually go after in free agency, and guys we're looking for, and I've touched on this with Heaney and Eovaldi and Rodon and guys we've looked at thus far. They go for usually guys coming off a tougher year, guys who have injury-riddled pasts, and the reason for that is because it dampens their markets. And the Twins believe they can find excess value in those sorts of players. The flip side of that as well is they prefer those 1-year deals. And I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg there. If it's 1-year deals, they only look at guys who they'd sign for 1-year deals, and those guys tend to be they're coming off of injury, or they literally target those players and they happen to only sign for 1 year because they want to rebuild their value. I think it's a little bit of both for this front office. They value the 1-year deal because they view it as risk-free, and they also value guys they think they can get more out of because their market is dampened. That's the Twins' MO in free agency, at least with starting pitchers. It's completely different on the position player side. There's some similarities. They don't weigh injury history as much as other teams, and that's, illustrated in the Donaldson signing. It's been illustrated in other signings they've made and trades they've made where injury histories just maybe matter a little bit less to them. Now, last year, I feel like we saw some adjustments. We saw trading away Mitch Garver. I think it was sort of a ploy to try to get healthier, and Garver ended up missing almost the entire year in Texas. Trading for Tyler Mahle and trading for Jorge Lopez, that's a change for them in investing in pitchers, and they're willing to part with top 100 prospects. We hadn't seen that in the past much, other than the Kenta Maeda trade and the Sonny Gray trade as well. So it's been more in the last year than the last 4 or 5 years prior of them willing to make some of these moves to invest in pitching, to buy high on Jorge Lopez, to buy high-ish on Tyler Mahle at the deadline in a seller's market. We've seen them make some adjustments. So I'm hopeful that this offseason we'll see more of that adjustment because they're so staunch in their process. And we went over this so much last offseason. They're so staunch in what they believe and what they're going to do. Hopefully that starts to shift, because what we've seen is a 1-year deal is not risk-free. A 1-year deal can hurt you because the player doesn't perform, right? Dylan Bundy, Chris Archer, Jay Happ, list goes on. Player does not perform. That's what hurts you, not the contract. It's the player who hurts you. Maybe we'll see a shift. And with Nathan Eovaldi and Andrew Heaney, I think those two really fit the Twins' MO, especially of guys we've looked at to this point. Carlos Rodon doesn't, but they've targeted him in the past. So, and they're interested in him again. Of course, they should be. Everybody should be, and they will be on Carlos Rodon. he does have that injury history, so that's factored in. What about Koudai Senga from Japan and then Jameson Taillon, who's coming from the Yankees to free agency? What about those two? Let's start with Taillon, who's 31. He just turned 31 in November. I remember when the Yankees traded for Taillon in the offseason, the 2019 offseason, just before the COVID shutdown. They traded for him, I believe, or maybe it was after the COVID year. But I remember when they traded for him, and the feeling on Taillon was he's got untapped potential because he was in Pittsburgh. We saw what happened with Tyler Glasnow. We saw what happened with Garrett Cole. Jameson Taillon is a breakout candidate. And sometimes when that narrative is pushed, it pans out. Like Joe Musgrove broke out in San Diego, leaving Pittsburgh. Garrett Cole did with Houston and Glasnow as well. But sometimes there's gray area. Like Glasnow's been hurt a lot, so he's been unable to provide much value. And like even his innings, while he's electric, it's not like he's some dominant starter his whole career. You know, he hasn't been that guy yet. Musgrove up and down was great in the postseason for San Diego, but there's usually some gray area. And for Jameson Taillon, he didn't break out per se for the Yankees. Like he was a solid pitcher for the 2 years he was there. He filled innings, made 61 starts. His ERA was exactly league average, 100 ERA plus, 408 ERA, 416 fielding independent pitching. So he didn't break out really. I mean, before he went to New York, injuries had hampered him, but he had a 112 ERA plus in Pittsburgh from 2016 to 2019. The positives are he only made 82 total starts from 2016 all the way up until his first pitch with the Yankees in 2021. And then in the last 2 years, he's made, 61 starts for New York. That's the positive, is he's been able to stay healthy and pitch, reasonably well for the Yankees. What do I like about him? What do I not like about him? And do I think he's somebody the Twins would target? It's all coming up after this word from betonline.net. Betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at betonline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. I love the website personally, but on the phone, it's so easy. Whatever you want to do, they have you covered at BetOnline. And that's not just the platform, it's what you're looking for. BetOnline's where the game starts for sports betting info, stats, news, analysis, lines if you want to play. If you don't even want to play, if you want to just go find out more, if you want to go listen to some podcasts, you can do all of it at betonline.net. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Thanks again for making Locked On Twins your first listen every single day. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Jameson Taillon. We'll get to Kodai Senga as well, who's so intriguing to me. Taillon is as well, though. And, what I've really focused on in this starting pitcher series so far is innings eater versus a higher upside injury question mark, right? You don't fall into two buckets, just like those trades the Pirates have made. There's a lot of gray area in there. There's room for upside often with guys. And if there is, like, you'll see teams value those players more on the open market. And I think that definitely applies to Kodai Senga, at least looking for value, excess value. Jameson Taillon threw exactly 1,000 four-seam fastballs. That's really satisfying. Exactly 1,000 four-seam fastballs in 2022. Opponents hit 257, Wohlbat 330, 23% whiff rate, good spin rate on the pitch. He averaged 94 with it, like pretty standard four-seamer, right, for Jameson Taillon. What I like about him is he's got a mixed bag. Like he really mixes it up. And we saw that when he pitched against the Twins. He seemed like he kept hitters off balance. Four-seamer, slider, curve, sinker, cutter, change. He throws his four-seamer the most at 36%, but then everything else is kind of evened out. His slider is his second most used pitch, but everything in there like is that 8 to 18 range. 18.8 on the slider, 15% on the curve, 11% on the sinker, 11% on the cutter, 8.5% on the changeup. He really mixes it up. And one spot I'm looking at here is that curveball. His curveball is his best off-speed pitch. He used it at a 15% clip this year. Opponents hit 168. Expected WOBA on the pitch this year, 207. Really high spin rate, good whiff rate. So with Jameson Taillon, maybe what you say is, hey, the slider's okay. Slider's a decent pitch. Like, you're not going to scrap the slider. Still gets decent whiff numbers, not a ton of hard contact on the pitch, but he can hang and he gives up homers. And what I would say to him is maybe let's bump up that curveball usage. Like, let's go four-seamer curve against lefties, and against righties, let's favor the curve as well as the primary secondary, right? That's how I would view it for Taillon. Against righties, he was really slider heavy. Slider, 29% slider. Only threw that curveball 13% of the time against righties. That's okay to me. Like, I don't mind that mix because I tend to favor the slider, right? Against right on right sliders, and the Twins in the past, at least with Wes Johnson, have loved to tweak that and really bump up the usage as well. But he had pretty even split. So there's room to make changes here with his pitch mix, I think, especially. He's coming from New York, and they're known, like, they've been able to get more out of starters in the past. So these are things they could have already gone into with Jameson Taillon. But to me, like, the spin rates are great, and this is part of the reason people thought he might break out when he went to New York. The spin rates are really solid. He stayed healthy. He's got good velocity, not great velocity, but good velocity. He can bump it up there. He did give it up a lot of home runs, and Yankee Stadium can do that to a pitcher. And that's, you get him out of Yankee Stadium into Target Field. I think there's more of that good fortune for him in Target Field, especially against lefties. But there's intriguing parts about Jameson Taillon, and enough where I would think the Twins would be interested in him. 3.47 ERA at home, 4.36 on the road is weird. I think those would even out over an extended sample size. He had a really nice second half in terms of OPS against 686 compared to 733 in the first half. He's a solid pitcher. Like, today, Jameson Taillon is a solid mid-rotation starter. I do think there's upside here if you were to make some of those tweaks, get into that curveball a little bit more, change up this pitch mix, rely a little bit less on the four-seamer perhaps. He likes to throw the slider, which I don't mind. And then that curve. I mean, the sinker gets hit pretty hard. And that we often see that. Like, scrap the sinker, throw more sliders. That seems like a buzz term for some of these guys. But I like Taillon. And I think the Twins would like Taillon for those reasons. I think if they saw that, and maybe this is obvious to teams, make a couple changes pitch mix wise, and instead of hovering 4 ERA, he's a 3.60, 3.70 ERA, and he's a solid mid-rotation starter with an ERA that's 15 or 20% better than league average. And in the Becker median, saying Taillon will get a median of 3 years and $43.5 million, you're getting excess value on that contract. If he is a 1.15, 1.20 ERA plus guy, that's a borderline top of the rotation starter. It's like a high end number 3, a low end number 2. I think Taillon can get there. For the Yankees in the last 2 years, both years, exactly league average. He's like a mid rotation number 3, in a playoff rotation. Koudai Senga, the upside with the Japanese phenom. What do I think? What would the Twins think? Perhaps. I'm going to take a guess after this word from Simply Safe. If you've thought about securing your home with home security, but you've been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Twins listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Simply Safe. It was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report for a 3rd year in a row. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real, so you can get priority police response. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system we recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Kodai Senga, maybe the most interesting player on the free agent market this year, coming over from the Japanese league, pitching for SoftBank in 2022, had a sterling 1.89 ERA in the NPB. He has a 2.59 ERA in 11 seasons. And sometimes you see that and it's covering up less than stellar stuff. That ain't the case with Koudai Senga. Right-hander, throws up to triple digits, throws 100 with a nasty splitter. So he's got nasty stuff. And for that reason, the Becker median on Kodai Senga is 4 years and 72 million. That's 18 million a year. Some command questions for Senga. Is he going to be able to hold up as a starter in the big leagues? Like, does he have enough to start every fifth day against the best hitters in the world? Legitimate questions, but he's still, I mean, he's projected to make 70 million in free agency. He's never pitched, never thrown over here in the bigs. Like that tells you how teams, I think, are going to evaluate his stuff. Senga is fascinating to me, and he's a fascinating free agent case because anytime, like, this is like the Moneyball era, right? And like I think almost every front office thinks this way. The big markets seem to be in on Kodai Senga. Like I think the Dodgers, the Yankees, all of those teams, they'll be probably involved on Senga. And the reason for that is they can absorb if this contract goes bad. If they sign Senga for 4 years and 75 million and he turns out to be a reliever, he gets hurt, he's not the same as he was in the MPB, they can absorb that. And then I think the flip side for them is if he's not, like, that's incredible value. That's the buzzword, value. When you don't know a guy, when you only watch him on video and you don't know how his stuff's going to play in the bigs, but you know he throws 100, you know he has a nasty splitter, your mind goes to these places of what he could be, right? And if he was here and if he was pitching here for all those years, would he get 300 million in free agency and we're going to get him for 75? I think if I was in a front office, that would be so interesting to me. I'd be like, okay, this could potentially be a franchise changing opportunity for us where we get Kodai Senga and he absolutely dominates for us on a less than market value contract. That's why I think his market's going to be hot this offseason because there's just so much room for dreaming with Senga because you haven't seen many chinks in the armor because he's been so good in the MPB. He has the stuff to match and he's never pitched here. He's experienced. He's going to be 30 in January. He's smaller, 6 foot 178. He's listed at as a right-hander. The possibilities in your head, they go and go and go with Kodai Senga because you just don't know. You don't know. Like the possibilities are seemingly endless for him in both directions. Would he be someone the Twins could be interested in? Honestly, he's hard to pin for them. I don't know. Again, there's so many question marks with him, and I think it would interest them to try to find that value for a frontline starter. He definitely matches the two descriptions, the two benchmarks I've placed on a starting pitching edition, which is 1, a frontline starter, or 2, somebody you believe you can turn into a frontline starter. Like those are kind of my benchmarks I've been working off of. I think Senga could fall into the 2 category. Is he a frontline starter now? Maybe. Like maybe he is, or maybe you believe you can turn him into that. Like maybe he's not right now, but you can tweak things and turn him into that. So many unknowns with him. Innings are sort of there, since 2019. He threw 180 and a third in 2019, 2021, 31. 2021 was down at 111, but came back this year through 148. So a reasonable expectation if he's effective is 150 innings. Like Taillon, like those trades we touched on, sometimes there's a middle area, a middle ground. And maybe for Senga, like coming over, pitching in the bigs, different experience, right? Completely different hitters, different opponents. Maybe he's sitting 96, 97. He makes a start every fifth day. He's a good mid-rotation starter, 350, 360 ERA, quite a bit of walks, but good strikeout numbers. And he's just a solid pitcher. That's a possible outcome here on this broad range that I think there is a broader range of outcomes for him than maybe anybody on this market because you just haven't seen him. We haven't seen him here. Or he could be an ace. He's got the stuff. Checks off that first box. He got the stuff. He does. Throws 100 with a nasty splitter. Or he could be a flame out reliever or not even be able to get outs in the big leagues. It's crazy. I love when these guys are posted, and because I'm so intrigued by the market and I'm so intrigued by how front offices, I think, get themselves going. And that's rightly so. Like he's extremely talented, one of the best pitchers in the MPB. Rightly so. I would get excited too. And I am. Like, I would be excited if the Twins made a run at Kodai Senga. And I'd be wondering all offseason and into spring training and into the regular season, who do we have? Like, oh my goodness, is Kodai Senga the next Johan Santana for the Minnesota Twins? It's like a prospect. It's like bringing in a top prospect, but except it's a 30-year-old who has thrown, over 1,000 innings overseas with a 2.42 ERA. That's where he's at, and he's coming over now. Like I said, I think the Dodgers will be involved. I think the Yankees will be involved. It sounds like the Blue Jays might be involved. I don't think the Twins are going to sign Kodai Senga, but he's somebody who, if it gets later, like if we get later in the offseason and Contreras and Abreu and Correa and Bogarts and all these guys have signed with whoever, and Kodai Senga's still out there, like waiting and wondering what he's going to get paid because teams have shied off or teams have allocated money in other areas. Maybe that's when the Twins get involved. He's a sleeper for that sort of addition. I think the number one, and we're going to do a deep dive on Wilson Contreras on Monday. He's the number one. Okay, we got this money to spend. Who are we going to spend it on? Correa's gone, Abreu's gone, Bogarts is gone. Who are we going to spend it on? I think Contreras is the number one guy for that, and we'll get to his fit on Monday. But Senga might be a sleeper for that money. I could see a scenario where he's still there in late December, January, late January, early February. Still, I don't know if there's actually a deadline. There might be a deadline, so I'll look that up and I'll correct myself on Monday if that's true. But he might be a sleeper for the Twins have this money to spend, and he hasn't quite got the number he's looking for, and the Twins sign him. It's a possibility. But again, I will look and I'll let you know Monday if there's a deadline for Senga to sign. That could blow up my whole sleeper plan there. I'm not sure, but very intriguing. I mean, these are two completely different free agents, but they're about the same age. They're both right-handed in Taillon and Senga, and one of them is fascinating because we haven't seen him in his stuff, and then the other could be a potentially very valuable addition for a playoff contender this offseason in Jameson Taillon. So those are the two. I think of everybody we've covered so far, still Eovaldi and Heaney makes sense to me the most for the Twins in terms of who they've targeted in the past. Then I might go to Taillon. Honestly, Senga's such a wild card in so many ways. Like, where does he even land on that list? I don't know, but I would go Eovaldi, Heaney, Taillon of the guys we've looked at so far are the most likely for the Twins to target and sign in free agency. Let me know what you think in the comments about Senga, about Taillon, about the Twins search for starting pitching, whether you think they should invest a ton in starting pitching, invest less. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts on, the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you again so much. Wilson Contreras, hot topic free agent for the Twins this offseason, analyzing his fit, whether I think it makes sense, whether I think he's a good investment on Monday's episode. Join me then. Thanks so much. In the meantime, have a great day and go Twins.